Welcome to Peace is a Choice, the podcast where we explore how conscious awareness can help us cultivate inner peace and transform our lives. I'm Natasha Wallace, and in each episode, we'll hear from guests about their personal journeys, the challenges they've faced, and how they've found greater levels of peace in their lives and positively impacted the lives of others. Today, I'm joined by two incredible guests, Alan Mulally, legendary former CEO of Boeing and Ford Motor Company, and Sarah McArthur, editor-in-chief of the Leader to Leader journal. Both Alan and Sarah have spent their lives helping people and organisations to succeed. And what connects their work so beautifully is their commitment to conscious leadership, leading with purpose, collaboration, and humanity. Between them, they've shaped global leadership thinking, turned around businesses, and dedicated their energy to supporting leaders through complexity and change. Alan and Sarah, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited for this conversation. I feel like I've been waiting for ages for this to happen, and now it's finally here. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the conversation today. So Alan, when we first met, it's because you'd got in touch after reading an article I'd written on conscious leadership in Leader to Leader magazine, which Sarah had published. So at the time, you told me that the conscious leadership model that I'd developed resonated with you in the way that you led organisations, and that it had captured your style in a way you hadn't seen written down before. And of course, since then, we've had several conversations about your amazing and extensive leadership experience, leading some of the largest and most successful organisations in the world. And it led us to exploring in depth how conscious leadership guides the way you lead and support others. And I really wanted the Peace is a Choice audience to learn about that too. So let's start right there. I define conscious leadership as an intentional, aware, and emotionally intelligent leadership approach that seeks to build togetherness and psychological safety in teams. But how do you define conscious leadership, and why do you believe it's crucial in today's organizations?
Oh, well, you bet. And Natasha, I think that's really a good question to start with. And I also want to point out for everybody that in addition to your Leader to Leader article, which is fabulous because it has all 5 elements of my working together leadership and management system and the leadership characteristics, your book, fabulous book also for everybody to read. So, and both of those will help everybody understand why I am who I am and why I developed over the years the working together leadership and management system. So the answer to your question is that conscious leadership is our working together leadership and management system and our committed, connected, and collaborative and aligned culture of love by design to create value and growth for all the stakeholders and the greater good. The key to everything about the leadership and management system is conscious leadership.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alan. And Sarah, what's your perspective on this? What's your take on what conscious leadership is?
Great question. And thank you so much for having us. We're so happy to be here, Natasha. And I'm one of the very fortunate people who has had the opportunity to get to work together with Alan Mulally and also Francis Hesselbein, and to see, I believe, conscious leadership in everything that they do. And to me, a conscious leader is one who is completely aligned in every interaction they have, in every organization they're leading, with every product they're coming up with, whatever they're doing, they are constantly aware of those around them and what they're doing. They're incredible people to learn from and to have the opportunity to work together with.
And I mean, it's amazing all the time we've spent together now over the last few months and listening to both Alan and yourself talking about the R working together sort of system, and we'll get into that more today. It's designed. I mean, as you say, it's love by design. You know, you're being very thoughtful and intentional about the way you lead. Why do you think that is so crucial in today's organizations? Alan, maybe if I come to you first.
Today, more than ever, working together and the effectiveness of working together is key to the future of the world. And you think about all the issues that we all are addressing, positive ones, one that need to be addressed, is that enabling people to work together is absolutely the key. And so who you are as a human being and what you do and how you do it is absolutely key. And the most wonderful thing about the conscious leadership, it starts with the be in addition to the do. And that's, remember, that was invented by Francis Hesselbein. And the be is your character. The do is all your practices and what you do and your competencies. And your be is also your beliefs and your values, which most people can't see, but they also can see your behaviors, which are your do. And so what's really key is that everybody that's committed to working together, that they absolutely know exactly how we're going to behave. And what I'm going to share with you is that when you use the Working Together Leadership Management System, you're so successful at participating with these behaviors, which includes truth and believing and loving and helping each other and listening and caring. Biggest thing that I learned was to align my beliefs and values with my behaviors. And so when you think of conscious leadership, it starts with your be part. And that's going to have more to do with your success on what you do and the things you're working on to serve others than anything else. So it's more important now than ever, Natasha.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because often it's not the thing that leaders focus on. The be part, as you say, and I've started using that since we've spent time together. I now talk about, you know, who do you want to be? And Sarah, what's your view of this? I mean, you've worked obviously extensively with Alan, and you and Alan work very, very closely together now. But you also have worked with Francis, who is another incredible leader. Why do you think leaders focusing on their be part is so important?
Francis has a quote. It is one of the most important things that Francis taught us. Francis, if you don't know anything about her, she was born in 1915. She passed away in 2022. She maintained consistency of character. So this quote that we feel so connected to and we love so much is, it is the quality of our character that determines our performance and results. This is a direct Alan. Alan adds this part to explain what this quote means to us. Who we are will have everything to do with our success. So the be, who we are, and the do, our performance and results, who we are will have everything to do with our success. And you can see there are leaders who we don't want to be like, who achieve great success, but it's not a success or results that we might want. And then we look at a leader like Alan, or we look at a leader like Francis, and who they are and how they have led with humility, love, and service and respect for all people. And we see the incredible results. The Boeing 777, the turnaround of the Girl Scouts of the USA, the turnaround of Ford Motor Company. We see the results, and we see the reaction and the people who got to work together during their leadership periods. We get to hear how people love that so much. Those are results that I feel so grateful to get to support and be a part of going forward and today.
And Natasha, just a little bit of data for you about what Sarah just said. The employee survey at Boeing when I left after 37 years, had moved to 95% positive of all the employees, over 300,000 people.
Wow.
And when I arrived at Ford, remember they were going to lose $17 billion, and Bill Ford wanted me to come and save Ford because there's a chance that they might go bankrupt after 110 years of service. And the employee survey was right 35% positive when I arrived because everybody was very concerned.
Yeah.
And when I left 8 years later, the employee survey at Ford was 95% also. These are all of the people, the same thing with all of the stakeholders. So you think about conscious leadership and what it meant to create Boeing and Ford, two of the most phenomenal companies ever in the world. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with more of your questions. And so what Sarah's saying about how important Francis was to the world, have them think who you are as a person, your awareness of everything about you, the awareness of everything about everybody else, and the awareness of what you're doing and what is really required by you and everybody else to work together.
And I hear what you say about conscious leadership and working together being more important than ever. And also there's this other narrative that I'm hearing at the moment, which is everything is about the bottom line and efficiency and productivity, and almost this idea amongst some leaders that a concept like conscious leadership or that orientation towards bringing people together and cohesing them, news we're hearing around the DE&I agenda and inclusion and all those sorts of things, I have a slight fear at the moment that those things are being seen as like soft and trivial and not the things that are going to fully impact the bottom line. It's going to be AI and efficiency and productivity that are going to affect the bottom line. So I would love it if you could share an example or can share examples of where you think this approach makes a real difference inside of an organization.
Great question. And you said a very important element in your question, and that's profitability of an organization. Very important, because either you're profitably growing or you're not. And if you're profitably growing, there are two reasons that we all know why that's so important. Because profits equals revenue times margins. And revenue is determined by the quality of your products and services that people want and they value and they'll pay for. And the margins are key because that means that you are increasing the efficiency and the quality of your products and services over time so that people want more of your wonderful services and products. And so a lot of people think about profits as being a negative thing, but if you think about long-term profitable growth, instead of trying to make some money just in the near term, just like Boeing and Ford, you're thinking long-term, or just like Francis with the Girl Scouts, the consciousness about including everybody so that they are creating value for the long term is absolutely key. And to answer your question about the examples, at Boeing, I joined Boeing in 1969, and I was there for 37 years. And my thesis advisor at the University of Kansas, when I was working on my graduate degrees in aeronautical and astronautical engineering, was the head of aerodynamics before he came to University of Kansas at Boeing. And he actually took me out of Kansas for the first time and took me to Seattle, introduced me to all of the leaders and the engineers especially, and we did a lot of technical work for them, and I love that. And the thing I learned from them is key to your question, is I saw the planes and I was in awe, and I was in awe of the engineers. But what really got me is I learned from them why they love Boeing. And the reason they love Boeing is that the first airplanes, like the 707, were taking people around the world, and there was no digital communication or technology. They were the technology that got people together. And they were on the planes, they were supporting them. And what they kept telling me was, Alan, this was getting people together that had never been together. And we found out that we had more in common as human beings, and we were different.
Mm-hmm.
And we all looked at each other and said, you know, we could actually work together and create good humanity for all of us. And that's why they loved making those airplanes. So the 707 I worked on, the 727, the 737, the 747, 757, the 767. And then Boeing asked me to be the leader of engineering on the 777. And then I was asked to be the program manager and then the vice president. And then they asked me to be the CEO of Defense and Space, part of the business, and then also be the CEO of commercial airplanes. And so I learned working together in my entire life. And when I got to Boeing, then I really started learning about it, because you had all these talented people that were working together to create these phenomenal products on schedule. And they are the most sophisticated products in the world. Like the 777 has 4 million parts, and it flies halfway around the world. It's the most safe and efficient airplane ever created. The key was working together all the way along. But then when we got to the 777, and it was a very competitive environment in the world, and people wanted a phenomenal airplane that had never been created before. And so that's when we really fine-tuned the working together, starting with the conscious behavior aspects. And so when we talk a little bit more about that, everything about the behaviors, in addition to the processes that we were going to follow, that everybody would be included, which they only could be successful if they operated with this being in their doing. So, and then not to go on and on about this, but the very same situation with Ford, and I'd answer one more to your question, is our family. Because Nikki and I are married for 55 years now. We have 5 kids and continuing increasing grandchildren. And guess how we all grew up together as a family, with our conscious working together leadership and management system with love by design.
Oh, so when you think back to your early influences, what were the moments or the people that you think really shaped the kind of leaders you've become? I mean, maybe Sarah, if we start with you.
That's an interesting question. I was raised, of course, by my parents, and we had a little bit of a different upbringing. So I was raised traveling the world in a Volkswagen van for a lot of my formative years, with my parents and my sister throughout Russia and Africa, Western and Eastern Europe and Canada, United States and Central America. And so I had this unique view, because I sat in the back of the van, and there's a 360-degree view out all those windows. And I had a global perspective. So I was traveling the world, watching the world change. It looked a little bit different. Like the topography was different. The climate was different. The dress of people was different, and the cultures were a bit different, and the architecture and the music and the art were all a little bit different. And yet what I noticed is that people were basically the same. They were all looking for meaning and purpose and an opportunity to contribute something of value and to be seen. And these are all things that Alan woke up in me. I can put words to what I'm describing because of my work together with Alan. He said that the reason that he created, or he and Ford and Boeing created safe and efficient transportation, is so that we could get together around the world and find out we have more in common than we do different. And so all this upbringing with my family when I was younger, that's what I got to live. And the leaders that I've gotten to work with along the way, starting with Marshall Goldsmith, the executive coach and best-selling author, and then Francis Hesselbein, and then now I get to work together with Alan, and all three have this in common, this positive, inclusive, working together. They're all about working together.
With respect to your question about the early development that you learned from Sarah, I'd like to start. I want to explain the loving up to you. Okay, so I had two wonderful parents. They both had really nice jobs. My dad was a post office person, and my mom was working at the University of Kansas in the art department. But we had relatively little financial resources. They were teaching me from the day I was born, and I think you know this, Natasha, but for people that are listening, they can read Work as Love Made Visible by Francis and Sarah and Marshall. They asked me to write the foreword to Work as Love Made Visible. And I read the book and I thought it was great. And I said, I don't think I can add a lot with that foreword. And Frances got up really close to me, Natasha, and she said, Alan, everyone knows who you are and they know what you have done and they know how you've done it. But what they don't know, that they want to know, is who you are and why you are who you are. Well, I said, Francis, there's a reason why I never share anything about why I am. I don't talk about myself. And she goes, exactly. But why you are who you are is really important because clearly that has resulted in who you are and enabled you to do everything that you've been doing. I go, well, how do I do that? She said, Alan, I just want you to write down your development as a human being. I said, oh, well, when do I start with that? She said, when you were born. I said, when I was born? I just got more excited about that the more I wrote it up. I thought it was really fun to do. And I shared every little detail about it. And when you look at those 4 or 5 pages that are in the book, Sarah and Francis and Marshall have told me that people love all of the other 35 authors that are written in the book. But what they really loved was starting out with that foreword where I explain why I am who I am. So my mom and dad wanted to teach me about what it's like to be a human being. And so here's the way my mom and dad did it. And my mom would always like to start out and she'd say, okay, honey, do you remember what the purpose of life is? And I said, oh, Mom, absolutely. You've really taught me well a purpose of life. And the purpose of life is to love and be loved. My mom got close to me just like Francis did. And she said, honey, remember, in that order, the purpose of life is to love and be loved. And then my dad always, no matter which other questions he was going to say, he'd always start out with, honey, now remember, to serve is to live. You're serving to live. You're serving others. You're serving humanity. I had over 27 different jobs from the day I was born all the way up through the grocery store as a checker. And then I also served every professor I had all the way through college. I was individually working together. It's us working together that's going to do it. So I started including everybody all the way along. And so you can imagine that here my life was going great. I was educated now. I go to Boeing. And so everything that I just described to you, who I was and how I did things from the day I was at Boeing. Now, they were a little bit more command and control at the time, but they were very interested in my working together. I have thoughts about that too.
Yeah.
Nikki and I were married for 55 years, like I described to you. And there's nothing that you can learn more about working together and conscious leadership than with a family. And then Boeing was phenomenal all the way along. And I get a call from Bill Ford, and he wants me to come and help and save Ford, and which we did. My last service is to share our working together leadership and management system with others.
It's a very, very powerful story, and I love your parents. They sounded amazing and clearly had a very, very big influence on you. And you took that, I mean, I would say unusually probably took that into your leadership and then created huge amounts of success. But actually, I mean, what was really interesting, because I've just written another article, because we've done quite a lot of work together now, so I could really, really understand your working together management and leadership system and the interplay with conscious leadership in my model. And it's just, you talk about validation. I mean, apart from the fact that I now feel even more validated with my model, because, you know, you turned Ford around through conscious leadership. So, I mean, that's huge validation, but it's just allowed me to sort of deepen my understanding. But also, there's a lot of courage, I think, that sits behind this. You know, when I listen to you and Sarah talk about your philosophy, and, you know, you talk about love and respect and working together and inclusion, they would be quite taboo in some leadership settings. They wouldn't be talking about that. You know, going back to profitability and bottom line and EBITDA and all of this sort of stuff. That's what they're talking about. So I have loved doing this work together, because it, you know, you have shown how, as one of the most successful leaders of all time, it's okay to care. And actually, arguably, it's the most important thing that you need to do.
Just think about the caring when to serve is to live. It's really straightforward. Every decision we're making is that helping serve others, humanity, because that's why we're alive. That's why we're here.
And since you've talked about that, I now check in with myself quite a lot and say that to myself. Like, bearing in mind, I'd already developed a model that had togetherness as part of it. And, you know, I know that the work that I'm doing is very purposeful and mission driven. But I think because we spent so much time talking about service, I'm now constantly checking myself to say, you know, is that in service of humanity? Is that in service of society? It's really, really powerful stuff. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the working together leadership and management system, how it works?
Alan recently shared with me a practice that he has every morning. And he wakes up every morning, and the first thing he does is he says hello to his partner in the mirror. How are you doing today? What's the plan today? What sort of decisions do we need to make today to serve? He does that every day. And so I, of course, learn, and now I have that practice myself. So every morning I go to the mirror. How are you doing today? What's the plan for today? How are we going to serve today? How are we going to serve others today? What decisions do we need to make to best serve? And it's amazing how I was doing great, and now
You're doing phenomenal.
Awareness and consciousness, talk about a conscious leadership practice, to be consciously aware of myself and my service. It's like even be aware of myself and acknowledge myself. What a practice. What a practice. Okay, your turn, Ellen. You go.
And just one thing to add to what she said, how am I doing on my be part as well as my do part? How are my beliefs? How are my values? How's my love of others, of life, of serving? Well, to have this person that you know well ask you these questions, this partner of yours, can you imagine how you walk away from that conversation every day and how honest you get with yourself, looking for lifelong learning and continuous improvement? See, in most people, the data says most people stop the learning part between their 35 and 40 years old. And what we're talking about with conscious leadership and working together is we are learning forever. You're not going to be able to make the contribution and the service and the difference you want to make if it doesn't start with you being so self-aware and be understanding that about others too. And whatever program you put together, just like your service and our service, that you don't have behaviors that are absolutely going to enable everybody to further develop their beliefs and values, because it's so neat. And then they have one life now, which is their life's work. And they have the same life at home, wherever they're working, with their religion, with the communities in which they operate. They'll be the same human being in every aspect of their life. That's why the work-life balance gets so simple, because they just have one life. And that's what everybody's telling us today that follow these principles and practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely see how that works. I mean, having worked on myself for the last 8 years since I started developing all of this, I'm the same everywhere. But I can remember, sat at dinner with the leadership team 10 years ago, and one of the senior leaders turning around to me and saying it was something along the lines of, because you're the same everywhere, aren't you, Natasha? You'd always be yourself. And I can remember saying to him, oh God, no, no, I don't behave like myself at work. And he was like, really? I thought you were really authentic. And I was like, no, I'm constantly masking, because I think if you were to see who I really was, everybody would be, people wouldn't like that person. I mean, now I can see that that's not true. That was just some made up thing that I had created. And now I couldn't imagine not just being myself everywhere that I go. In some settings you can be more casual, and in other settings you might need to be a bit more professional or polished, but nevertheless, it's the same version of you everywhere.
Absolutely. And if you're seeking that, just think about those principles and practices we've talked about. If you're seeking to understand before seeking to be understood about everything, I mean, the whole world's changing and stuff. And that brings me to the answer to your question about the principles and practices of the conscious leadership and working together. So these are all of the principles and the practices. So it's the be and the do. And I know you know the first one, but for everybody else, and this is what everybody learns when they join a program, they get introduced to these principles and practices, and they study them, and we have coaches for them, and we hold them accountable for operating this way. And if they choose not to, it's okay. It's okay. And what I mean by that is that I'll share with them, if this doesn't work for you, I mean, would you like, and you're not operating this way, because we'll see them in the business plan review every week, would you like more coaching to help you move in this direction? And if you don't, it's okay. And we wish you the very best in whatever other job you want to do somewhere else. But so you can imagine that I bet 95% of all of those over 2 million people have all moved in this direction because they're so successful. And they know now that these behaviors are phenomenal, and the values and beliefs that enable this are all aligned with. The way you said the question is really great. Here are the beliefs, the values, and the behaviors, because they're all integrated. They're all aligned. Okay, here's the first, and here's, when you tell everybody, here's why we're doing this. So we're developing a skilled, a healthy, and a psychologically safe, motivated teams. And this is what we need to do. First one is people first, love them up. I had a couple of people once and said, oh dear, are you looking for a date? I said, no, I'm not looking for a date. This is about loving them up. This is about appreciating people. Second one, everyone is included, all the stakeholders, which is just a big deal, because it used to be a lot for businesses, just the shareholders. So you have the customers and the suppliers and the governments around the world and the investors and the banks and all the communities. And you can imagine all the people that we include. And then the next one, so important, compelling vision comprehensive strategy, and relentless positive implementation for every aspect of your life, whatever you're doing, personally, together, in a business, whatever. Clear performance goals, one plan. Most companies have lots of plans. No one knows what the plan is. Facts and data. And the reason that's important is we care what people think. But we also want to know what the facts and data are, because we're going to be all here to help them when we have a problem. And that's why with the working together, when we have our business plan review, whatever the issues are, all of the leaders will share whether it's green, yellow, or red item. And if it's a red item, they're sharing that they have an issue, and they're working on turning that yellow and green, and we're all available to help them as they wish. Expect the unexpected and expect to deal with it. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Everyone knows the plan, the status, and the areas need special attention. This piece of paper is on everybody. Everybody carries it around. It's on every room around the world, and very complicated here. Now, propose a plan, positive, find a way attitude. Authentic and emotional resilience. Trust the process and each other. And the last one people loved because it was so true when they started operating this way. Have fun, enjoy the journey of service and each other. We want to win, and we know what we're going to be creating all these products and services. Let's write that at the bottom of our slide. And so the bottom of the slide says, are working together, and you can put conscious right in the front of working together, are conscious working together, leadership and culture to live and serve humanity with love and humility to create value and growth for all. So now this one piece of paper with these thoughts is what everyone carries around with them. And so when they operated this way, then their beliefs and values, no matter how they were developed over the years, they moved in this very positive way to get to the place where they were aligned with those behaviors. Isn't that neat?
So neat. And so I've got a question stemming from the dashboard, the green, amber, red status log. And you had told me before that the first time you said, right, I want everybody to come and, show me your colours. And everybody came with greens and ambers. Well, there were no reds, were there?
That is an absolute key to showing how effective this is to implement conscious leadership. This is how effective it is. So I said just what you said, Natasha. So I had the business leaders for each of the businesses and the products around the world. And then down the left-hand side of the matrix organization, I had all of the skill teams: engineering, manufacturing, procurement, communication, everything. And they're all there in the room. They're all going to go around the room in 2 hours. Everyone has about 5 or 7 minutes, go through their vision, strategy, and plan on what they're implementing, and any areas that need special attention, like the yellows and the reds. So I said, okay. And they knew the principles and practices now, and they loved that. And so I said, okay, we're going to start the business plan review. And at Ford, I started that within a couple of weeks when I arrived, after I shared all this with all 400,000 people. So we started the meeting, and we had 300 charts total, and all 300 charts, slides with this information on, the 3 or 4 charts by each person, they were all green, like you said. And I said in the nicest way, well, they didn't know until about a week ahead of that time that we were going to lose $17 billion, because that most companies don't share the situation about where they really are until they have to do it appropriately outside. And so they didn't know that. And no one has ever lost $17 billion. And that's why Bill wanted me to come, because he really wanted my help to save Ford. Is there anything in your area of responsibility that's not going well? This should be a yellow or a red. And boy, the eye contact, Natasha just went down. Like the thing, it's like they're looking at, and of course they're all sitting around a round table, plus the leaders that are around the room are up on the screen. So we have everybody there, and everybody's whoa. So I said, now the key to our working together now, this new leadership team, is our principles and practices. And it says there that we know everything. And it's all facts and data, and it's safe. You're never going to be read because you announced it. And so you can see how psychological safety is such a big deal in the organization, because most people can't share. They're scared to death to share. And most people today in the businesses they're in have a policy that you only bring up an issue if you have a solution. Now, you wonder why they're so stressed out and they don't sleep at night and blah, blah, blah. Well, in working together, they get a chance to share everything. And so they're also going to get help. And that's why we could have 4 million parts, deliver our airplane in 6.5 years, 2 days ahead of schedule, with that most sophisticated vehicle in the world, because this process enabled us to know every situation and then help each other turn the reds to yellows to greens. And then a couple of weeks later, one of the leaders, up comes a chart, and it's red, 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 red on the strategy, red on the implementation, and red on the finances, because he actually had to stop the production of these vehicles in Canada because they had a technical issue, and that's a big deal to stop all production. And I mean, everybody in the room, Natasha, kind of was looking down, but then they're looking sideways at me. Every one of them, all 14 of them, told me this later. They knew that that was a sign to open the doors behind me in the executive, the council room of the Ford Motor Company, and 2 large human beings were going to come in to extract this fellow from the room because he shared a problem when he didn't have a solution. Guess what the colors look like the following week, Natasha? They were phenomenal. And they had a number of reds, they had a number of yellows, but they also had a lot of greens. See, and a lot of people, when they have meetings like this, they only look at reds and what the issues are. No, show all of the greens and the yellows too, because people's confidence just skyrocket when they see everything that's going well, but also they learn about what all is going well, which helps them also deal with the stuff that they have a couple of reds with. And so that business plan review is a key. That's one of the 5 elements of the working together leadership and management system. The 5 elements are the principles and practices that you first asked about. The second is the governance process, starting with the leader, like myself, because if you don't have a leader that believes in conscious leadership, the be and the do, and has developed that capability, you aren't going to be able to implement this. And then the leadership team is a big deal, to create the leadership team that believes this and operates it and is held accountable for it. And then the creating value roadmap, the product, the process, the people, and the performance that's going to deliver your compelling vision. And the profit, both the revenue and the margins. And then the last one, the 5th one, is this business plan review that you asked about, where you're going over all of those elements every week in 2 hours. And so you can imagine how everybody gets so aligned, not only on what you're accomplishing, but they start moving so fast. See, it's the all-time educator of conscious leadership, because you have to do it. And if you don't want to do it, love you, wish you the best. We'll get you some more. We'll get you some more education, especially stakeholder-centered coaching.
Yeah.
Which is why Francis and Sarah and I are such good friends with Marshall, because his whole life was to teach people about the behaviors that you really need to be great at if you're going to make a difference to serve the greater good. So great question, Natasha.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I've mentioned it to a few people recently, this dashboard. And of course, lots of us will have had experience as leaders of using dashboards. However, I think there is a commonality in the responses I get from the people I talk to about this with, which is, yeah, but you're probably not going to come up with you're not going to show up with any reds, because that would mean telling the truth. And we're not going to do that, are we? So,
That's why that psychological safety is really important. And it starts with the leader again. So they got to know that they're loved up, that they're appreciated. They're human beings. They're making a difference. We're working with trust and respect and love. And look what we're accomplishing with that, because people are feeling so comfortable is absolutely key. Because if they don't feel safe, and not just they don't feel safe, but they don't feel loved up.
But it's all very transparent, isn't it? Because of course there would have been occasions, and you told me a story of a leader who wasn't demonstrating the behaviours that you would expect to see, but because you were always very, very clear about what good looked like.
And plus, here's another thing that Sarah was just so excited about when she learned this, that when we have this matrix organization, everybody is doing what we said with each other. So they're having a business plan review, they're talking to each other, and every time they see anything about these principles and practices and these behaviors, that they can make a comment to somebody in a positive way. So feedback is not about don't stop doing that or doing this. They all say it in a positive way. And that's the things I just said to you. See, it's not a negative thing you're doing. And you don't need to say the negative thing, because a lot of times when you say a negative thing, people don't understand what you mean. But when you say positive about where you're going and what you expect, oh man, they'll have little questions about it. They go, oh yeah, and what's that mean? How do I do that? Blah, 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 blah. Because, and also remember, when we hired everybody on every project, that was part of the education system. And we provided them these kind of coaches from day one, and everybody learned this real fast. But the reason they learned it so fast is that every week we did this. And you can imagine they would not, can you imagine being in that room and then ever being a command and control and beating people up and telling everybody what to do in front of this whole team? Never. I mean, these are human beings. They would never treat another person that way. So what they're doing is they're looking at everybody else and learning from each other. In addition to me, they're learning from everybody on that room. So no matter how you grew up, no matter what you learned and stuff, that's okay. Because if you have to behave this way, back to what we talked about and Sarah talked about, is that when you operate this way, then your beliefs and values move this way. Man, do you start being aligned with your behaviors on you're here to serve is to live and love people up and make a difference, a positive difference to create value and growth for humanity.
Building on that, Sarah, you've worked with many prominent leaders around the world. I'd look at your job sometimes and think you've got some sort of dream unicorn job. Alan was talking about psychological safety. What leadership practices have you seen that builds that sort of environment?
Oh, wow. What a great question. I can give you examples for every single one of the, I call them my two peas in a pod, but then they say there's a little room for me, and then we bring Marshall in. So my two peas in a pod are Francis and Alan. And so I can give you a little story of, remember when COVID struck and the world was in such chaos and everybody was just coming up with all sorts of things, and it was pretty dark. And I was living here in Easton, Pennsylvania, and Frances was living in New York, and we couldn't get together. So I called her up on the phone and I said, Frances, have you seen everything that's going on in the world? And she said, yes, darling. And I said, well, Frances, what are we going to do? And she said, we will get through this together. And that's it. For every challenge and opportunity we face, we will get through this together. And that's Frances's outlook. And that's how Frances treats others. That's how she acted in the world. And then Alan, I mean, the name of our working together leadership and management system is working together. That means we're all in it together. So we have our leadership team, and it's an element of our working together leadership and management system. And in our leadership team, what that means is that the leader is really, really important in Alan taught me this one. The leader is really, he said it over and over. Francis said it too. The leader is really important. And it's not because the leader knows everything and, can tell everybody what to do. And that's not why. The leader is really important because their job, their role, they are responsible and accountable to holding us against themselves and the leadership teams responsible and accountable to the principles and practices of humility, love, service, respect for all people, people first, love them up. That's their job. And those two, I've met a lot of people. I must say, I have met a lot of people. And I must say too, that the greatest leaders I have ever met in my life who do this better than anybody I've ever met in my whole life are Alan and Francis.
Against a backdrop of having to creating a psychologically safe environment, there must be tough decisions to make sometimes. What are some of the tough decisions you've had to make as a conscious leader?
Do you remember in 2008, and we had the horrible situation,
the Great Recession
with our economy? I mean, it was unbelievable. GM and Chrysler went bankrupt, and Ford did not. And matter of fact, I actually testified on their behalf with government for a little bit of temporary money for the good of the United States, because if a number of large companies like that had gone under, we would have had a recession, a depression that would have been worse than anything we've had since early 1900s. And so they did. And I remember that was another really important decision to make, is would I continue to try to do this without borrowing money from the government? Remember, we were going to lose $17 billion when we started out. And it was important, that a decision I had to make, that you could argue, well, I get the money and then it'd be easier and I'll do this and do that and blah, blah, blah. And no, I didn't think that was absolutely the right thing to do. So I chose not to. And we continued to implement the plan. And we went from our $17 billion loss to making $3 billion, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 billion. And I've never received so many notes in my life, Natasha, from everybody around the world commenting on, and it was neat to be able to share with them that this plan enables you to deal with everything that we're going to deal with in life, everything. And the fact that you're doing this with so many talented people, that every decision you make is going to be very, very effective. And if that didn't work, then you'd use all that talent again to figure out another way to do it. I think that the confidence you get, that everybody will get by implementing this and being this and doing this, and not just because of you, but because all of the people that you are serving are becoming this kind of being person and this kind of doing. And then think about also, to your question, what that means to their lives and how happy they are. And they'll tell you, my gosh, our love is made visible now. I mean, that's why Marshall and Sarah's and Francis' book is so neat about Work is Love Made Visible, because everybody starts appreciating it and being loved up, because they can see the love, and they have one life, which is their love made visible of their service with love and humility. And so I don't know of anybody that has implemented this that has not been wonderfully successful, and they have absolutely loved it.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure there's plenty of people listening who are going to be running out to buy Work is Love Made Visible. I can see it on the shelf behind you. The two of you collaborate a lot. I mean, you've got a very, very good working relationship. You're close. What have you learned from each other?
Really, I've learned from Alan how to be, really, from, the formation principles. The first one I got to learn, I know them all. I love them all. every single one is my favorite, but that first one, really, really my favorite. The Love and Be Loved, in that order. Every time I talk with him, every time I see him talking with anybody else, he shows me exactly what that looks like. And that's just one of the most beautiful gifts. And then, of course, I've learned our working together leadership and management system very well. And I've learned a lot about follow-up and being thorough and concentrating. I mean, all of the things that would build a great 777 airplane and lead millions of people.
And my answer to your question, Natasha, what I absolutely learned from Sarah is all about Sarah that we're talking about. I was good friends with Marshall Goldsmith, and she was working for him. And of course, she's a best friend of Francis. And we ended up with a relationship that I'll just like Sarah with Francis. That's just one of the best friends I've ever had. And we worked together really closely. And she named me the leader of the future that people needed to get to know. Sarah, we were dear friends.
Yeah.
And she had a wonderful life up to 107. Sarah, you just got to mention what our working together relationship was up until just a week or so before she passed away.
Up until the very end. So I was fortunate enough to be the holder of the FaceTime phone. So I got to facilitate and be together with Alan and Francis when they would have they would have a weekly phone call, basically a BPR. So it was I always think of Francis was the leader, and Alan was giving us a report on every area of his life. And so Francis, she would listen to every word and she would say, "Oh, that's wonderful. That's so wonderful." And then she would turn to me because I would be sitting next to her and she'd say, "Doesn't he have the most beautiful blue eyes?" And Alan would, he'd just keep telling us everything that's happening. And it was great. Can you imagine being able to be a part of these two great leaders encouraging and loving each other? What a wonderful thing to be a part of. One thing we haven't mentioned that we got to do, Alan and I were both executive producers of a documentary film about Francis, about her life and leadership. Our working together leadership and management system produced an extraordinary documentary because we led it that way.
Alan, we said we would come back to how you have applied our working together model at home with your family, because it wasn't just in the workplace that you were showing up as a conscious leader. It was with your family and all of your children. So do you want to talk to us about that?
Nick and I, we got married and we wanted to have 5 children. That was kind of our dream. And so we got married about a year after I joined Boeing. And she was a teacher and she taught for a while. Then we started our family. And so she was learning a lot about Boeing. And I think it happened maybe after we had Chris and then also Tim, after we had 2 children. And so I approached her one day. I said, "So, Nikki, I think we need to have a business plan review every Sunday, and like I do at Boeing." And she said, "Honey, this is not a business. I don't think we need a business plan review." And I said, as respectful as I am, of course, I said, "Okay." And then I started to think about what she said. I thought, gosh, this is great. She said a key word, family. So the next week I went back, Natasha, and I said, "So, honey, I think we need to have a family plan review every week." And I'd take mine, go back to Boeing, give it to my dynamite assistant. She'd build it in my calendar. And people always knew that if I was gone for an hour or 2 hours, I'd be back. I was just as part of the integrated plan. Marshall did a version of this, which he did it all by himself, where he was working on his own life plan. And so I showed him how to do the business plan review and the principles and practices and deciding what you wanted to do with it. And he did that. And now he has had an unbelievable rest of his life implementing what he wants to do. Now he's including everybody. When you do it by yourself, you're talking to that person in the mirror. And your family works great. Small, medium, large organizations, it works for everybody.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, as always, I could carry on talking to you for hours. That seems to be part of our relationship now. We can't do a short call, can we? Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for all of your time. You're always so generous with it. And I know that anybody that listens to this will have gotten so much value. All of the stakeholders of the world will have gotten so much value from this conversation today. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Pieces of Choice. For any information on what we've covered in today's episode, and to connect with my guests, head to the show notes. It would be great if you could rate and review the podcast and subscribe now so you don't miss out on any future episodes.